Kweku was sitting in his office in Accra when the gold-trimmed envelope landed on his desk. He didn't need to open it to guess who it was from, but curiosity won. Inside was an invitation to Ama's wedding, the same woman who had once promised him forever, only to leave him for a man with more money and influence. Years ago, she hadn't just broken his heart, she had embarrassed him in front of everyone who mattered to him. Now, the words on the glossy card felt less like an invitation and more like a message, a reminder that in her eyes, he would never be enough. The tone of it carried arrogance, like she wanted him to know that she had won and he had lost. For a moment, old wounds reopened. He remembered the whispers, the smirks, the pitying looks when Ama had chosen wealth over love. Any other man might have tossed the card into the trash and avoided the whole affair. But Kweku wasn't just any man. He had built himself up from nothing, carved his own path, and proven to everyone that he was more than capable. He wasn't going to let Ama's arrogance bruise his pride again. Instead of sulking, a strange smile crept across his face. If she expected him to arrive alone and defeated, she was about to be very wrong. That night, Kweku made a decision so bold it shocked even him. He would not walk into that wedding by himself. He would turn the stage she had set into his own. It was late at night when Kweku was driving back home from a long day at work. The streets of cantonments were quiet, the kind of silence that makes you notice every small detail. As his car slowed near the bridge, his eyes caught sight of someone sitting alone on the cold pavement. A woman wrapped in a torn blanket, her back resting against the wall, clutching a battered notebook as though it was the only thing she owned. For reasons he couldn't explain, Kweku stopped the car and stepped out. She looked up at him, and even in the dim light, he could see her eyes were bright, sharp, alive. Her name was Zuri. She told him in a calm but steady voice that she used to be a writer, once even a top student who gave speeches as valedictorian. Life, however, had not been kind. Betrayal by people she trusted had stripped her of family, money, and home. Now she lived under the bridge, writing thoughts and stories in her old notebook, still holding on to pieces of the woman she once was. What struck Kweku wasn't her condition, but the way she carried herself. Even in worn-out clothes, she spoke with wit, with dignity that poverty hadn't erased. She didn't beg, she didn't complain, she simply met his gaze with the quiet pride of someone who still knew her worth. Kweku listened, fascinated. The more she spoke, the more he realized that beneath the dust and pain was someone extraordinary. She was nothing like the shallow, arrogant faces he was used to in society circles. And then, almost without thinking, he laughed softly and said the most outrageous thing she could imagine. "Be my date to a wedding," he told her. Zuri frowned, confused. He leaned closer and added, "It's not about love. It's about revenge." At first, she thought he was joking, or maybe a little mad. Why would a man dressed in fine clothes, clearly wealthy and successful, want her, a woman with nothing, to stand beside him at some grand wedding? But his eyes were steady, his tone serious. Kweku explained just enough, that the wedding belonged to someone who once mocked him, someone who thought he would never be good enough. He didn't want to walk in alone. He wanted to walk in with someone who could shake the ground. Zuri laughed nervously, hugging her notebook tighter. "Me? Look at me. I don't belong in a place like that." But Kweku shook his head firmly. "You belong anywhere. You just forgot it for a while. Let me remind you." There was a pause, heavy with possibility. Zuri studied him, searching for a trap or pity in his expression, but she found neither. She found sincerity. For the first time in years, someone wasn't seeing her as broken, but as someone who could still command respect. That night, under the bridge, a strange alliance was born. Two people scarred by betrayal, bound by a shared hunger to rewrite their stories. And with one bold proposal, Kweku had set in motion something neither of them could fully imagine. Kweku kept his word. The very next morning, he returned to the bridge where Zuri had been sitting with her old notebook. This time he didn't just stop to talk. He asked her to come with him. At first she hesitated, clutching her blanket like it was her only shield. Life had taught her not to trust promises, not to believe in kindness that seemed too good to be true. But the look in his eyes was steady, almost unshakable. Slowly, she stood up and followed him, carrying nothing but her notebook. When they reached his home, Zuri felt completely out of place. The polished floors, the tall glass windows, the smell of fresh flowers, it was another world. She wanted to turn back, to run to the bridge where at least she blended with the shadows. But Kweku gently told her to stay. He had already made arrangements. A spa team arrived, soft-spoken women who treated her with care, washing years of dirt and struggle from her skin and hair. The hot water, the oils, the gentle hands. It felt unreal, like she was waking from a long nightmare. Next came the wardrobe. A stylist rolled in racks of elegant dresses, heels, and accessories. Zuri shook her head in disbelief, saying over and over, "This is not me. I don't belong in these clothes." But when the stylist zipped her into a simple but graceful gown, everything changed. She turned toward the mirror, and for the first time in years, she saw herself, not the woman beaten down by betrayal, not the one hidden under a torn blanket, but Zuri, the woman she had once been. Her eyes glowed, her posture straightened, and a soft gasp escaped her lips. She could barely recognize the reflection. Kweku stood behind her, watching her expression. He smiled faintly and said, "This isn't about pretending. You're not becoming someone new. You already are more than they'll ever be. I just want you to see it again." His words struck her deeper than any compliment ever had. She touched the mirror, almost as if to confirm that the woman staring back was truly her. For a moment, her doubts fought back. What if people at the wedding saw through her? What if they laughed at her past? But then she remembered how Alma's arrogance had crushed Kweku once, how her own betrayals had nearly destroyed her. She realized this wasn't only about his revenge, it was about her reclaiming her dignity. She wasn't hiding anymore. By the time the final touches were done, her hair shining, her face glowing with subtle makeup, her figure wrapped in elegance, Zuri no longer looked like the woman under the bridge. She looked like someone who could walk into any room and command silence. The transformation was breathtaking, but it wasn't just about the clothes. It was about a woman rediscovering her strength. Kweku knew it, and deep down, so did Zuri. What awaited at the wedding would be shocking, but for now, she was ready to face the world again. The wedding day finally arrived, and Kumasi was buzzing with luxury. Expensive cars lined the streets near the grand venue, while inside, chandeliers glowed over tables decorated with gold and white. Politicians, business moguls, and society's finest mingled, their laughter and voices filling the air. At the center of it all stood Alma, radiant in a designer gown, her hand wrapped around her groom's arm. She soaked in the attention like a queen on her throne, convinced the day was her victory lap. Every detail screamed wealth and power, and she wanted everyone to see it. But amid the music and chatter, one topic floated through the crowd: Kweku. People whispered, speculated, craning their necks toward the entrance to see if he would really dare to show up. Some expected him to arrive alone, maybe embarrassed, maybe bitter. Others thought he wouldn't come at all. But then the doors opened, and the murmurs turned into a stunned hush. Kweku walked in calmly, dressed in a sharp-tailored suit, but it wasn't him the room noticed. Every pair of eyes shifted to the woman beside him. Zuri. Her gown shimmered under the lights, elegant but not loud, her posture straight, her steps unhurried. She wasn't trying to steal attention, yet she owned it completely. There was something in the way she carried herself, a quiet authority that made even the most powerful guests pause. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, glasses froze halfway to lips. Alma turned just in time to see them. The sight of her ex-fiancé standing tall was shocking enough, but the woman at his side nearly made her drop her champagne glass. Alma's perfect smile faltered, her fingers tightening around the stem as if it might break. Who was this woman? Where did Kweku find her? And why did it feel like, in one simple entrance, all the light in the room had shifted away from her? Zuri didn't need to say a word. Her presence alone unsettled the carefully crafted atmosphere. People began whispering to one another, asking her name, speculating about her background. Some thought she was royalty, others assumed she was a rising star from abroad. No one could imagine that only days earlier, she had been sitting under a bridge. That secret belonged to her and Kweku, and tonight it was their weapon. Kweku, noticing the ripple of shock, stayed composed, offering polite nods as he moved through the crowd. But his pride wasn't in himself, it was in Zuri. She walked beside him like she belonged, as though she had been born into this world of silk and diamonds. And the truth was, in that moment, she did. Alma forced her smile back, trying to mask the storm brewing inside her. But no matter how much she pretended, everyone had already seen her slip. Zuri's entrance had shifted the energy of the night. It was supposed to be Alma's stage, but now all eyes followed the woman who came from nowhere and stole the show without even trying. Alma could no longer hide her discomfort. She had built the day to be perfect, the wedding of the year, the event people would talk about for months. Yet now the attention she craved had slipped through her fingers and was following Zuri instead. She forced her lips into a practiced smile, lifted her gown slightly, and walked toward Kweku and his mysterious date. The crowd leaned in, eager to watch. This was the confrontation they didn't know they needed. Alma's heels clicked against the marble floor, each step filled with fake confidence, but her eyes betrayed her agitation. When she reached them, her voice came out smooth but laced with venom. "Oh, Kweku," she said sweetly, though the sweetness was clearly forced, "I didn't know you had a type." Her eyes flicked up and down Zuri, pretending to measure her, as if she were unworthy of the room she was standing in. A few guests chuckled quietly, waiting for Zuri to shrink back, to blush in shame or stumble over words. That was what Alma wanted, a public display of weakness. But Zuri did not crumble. She stood with her chin slightly raised, calm as still water. Her eyes softened, her lips curved into the faintest smile, and when she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but sharp enough to cut glass. "A type," she said. "If you mean someone who carries grace without needing a price tag, then yes. I suppose he does." The words landed like a slap hidden in silk. The smirks in the crowd vanished, replaced by wide-eyed stares. Alma's smile stiffened, her knuckles whitening around her champagne glass. She tried again, her voice tightening. "Well, I hope you're enjoying the view. Not everyone gets to walk into a hall like this." She gestured around at the chandeliers and guests, as if the room itself was her crown. Zuri's expression didn't falter. "True," she replied softly, "but not everyone needs a hall like this to know their worth. Some of us learned that long before the decorations." Her tone wasn't loud, but it carried so clearly that even those standing several feet away caught every word. A ripple moved through the room, half awe, half shock. Alma laughed nervously, her eyes darting to the groom, searching for support. But even he shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening as if he wished he could disappear. The guests began murmuring, their eyes no longer on Alma's expensive dress or her groom's wealth, but on Zuri, who had just dismantled arrogance with elegance. And Zuri never raised her voice, never lost her calm. Each word she spoke was measured, wrapped in dignity, yet sharper than any insult Alma could throw. The room felt the shift. The perfect bride's facade was cracking, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Kweku didn't need to say a thing, Zuri's poise had already won the moment. The dinner hall was glowing with golden light, the sound of cutlery and laughter filling the air as the guests enjoyed their meals. Waiters moved between the tables with trays of wine, while Alma and her groom sat at the center table like royalty. The moment everyone had been waiting for soon arrived, the toasts. Alma stood gracefully, her gown sparkling under the chandeliers. She raised her glass, her smile wide but her eyes sharp, scanning the crowd until they landed on Kweku. The room went quiet, eager to hear what she would say. With a laugh that sounded more smug than joyful, she began. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, lifting her glass higher, "I'd like to take a moment to thank someone very special. My dear ex-fiancé, Kweku. He taught me exactly what I did not need in a man." A wave of laughter rolled through the hall. Some laughed nervously, others loudly, eager to please her. Alma basked in it, proud of her cruelty disguised as charm. She turned back to Kweku with a satisfied smirk, as though she had finally crushed him once again. But before the room could settle, a chair scraped softly against the floor. Zuri stood up. Her movements were unhurried, her face calm, but the confidence in her eyes was impossible to ignore. The guests whispered, surprised that the quiet woman beside Kweku dared to rise. Zuri took the microphone from the stand, holding it gently, her presence commanding silence without effort. She began simply, her voice steady and clear. "It's interesting," she said, "how some people believe their story is the only one worth telling. But I have one too." The hall shifted, the laughter dying as curiosity replaced it. Zuri continued, her gaze sweeping the room. "I once had everything, family, education, dreams. I was a writer, a valedictorian, a daughter who made her parents proud. Then life betrayed me. I lost everything I thought defined me, and I found myself with nothing but a torn blanket and a notebook under a bridge." A gasp rippled through the crowd. No one had expected this. She didn't flinch, didn't waver. "But here's the truth," she said, her tone growing stronger, "strength is not built by money, or gowns, or glittering halls. Strength is built when you've been broken, when you've tasted the dirt of life, and you still choose to rise." The guests hung on every word. Even the groom looked down at his plate, uncomfortable. Zuri lifted her glass, her final words echoing across the silent hall. So tonight, I raise a toast, not to wealth or status, but to the lessons hidden in pain. To men who mistake wealth for worth, and to women who mistake status for happiness. The room froze. Not a single laugh followed. The silence was heavy, powerful, undeniable. All eyes turned to Alma, whose smile had vanished completely. For the first time all night, she looked exposed, stripped of her armor. And Zuri, with nothing but her voice and her truth, had silenced the entire room. The silence after Zuri's toast still hung heavy in the air. Guests shifted uneasily, glasses untouched, while Alma sat frozen, her perfect smile long gone. Then, just as the tension seemed unbearable, a voice rose from one of the tables near the front. "Wait," a man said, leaning forward, eyes fixed on Zuri. He was one of the groom's business partners, a man known for his sharp memory and sharper instincts. He squinted, his expression filled with shock. "I know you," he whispered, but loud enough for the room to hear. All eyes turned to him, then back to Zuri, who stood calmly with the microphone still in her hand. The man pushed back his chair and stood. "You're Zuri Mensah, aren't you?" A gasp rippled across the hall. The name carried weight, history, and power. Murmurs spread like wildfire. People began recalling the stories, the tragedy, the mystery. Zuri's eyes softened, but she did not deny it. She gave a small nod. The man went on, excitement rising in his voice. "Your father, Kwame Mensah, the legendary writer. His books changed lives. People still study his words in universities. But when he passed, there were rumors about unpublished manuscripts worth millions. And then you disappeared. Everyone wondered what happened to you." The room erupted with whispers. Some covered their mouths in disbelief, others leaned forward, desperate for more. Alma's face drained of color, her hand trembling around her glass. She looked as though she had seen a ghost. Zuri finally spoke, her voice calm but filled with quiet strength. "Yes, Kwame Mensah was my father. After he died, I was betrayed by people I trusted. Legal disputes stripped me of everything he left behind, including my home. I vanished, not because I was weak, but because I was fighting battles no one else could see. I lost my inheritance, my name, my place in the world. But I never lost myself." The room listened in stunned silence. Kweku, sitting proudly at her side, gave her a reassuring nod. Zuri continued, her words steady. "With Kweku's support, I am here today to tell you that the manuscripts they tried to bury, the legacy they tried to erase, is mine to reclaim. Every page, every word belongs to me, and I will make sure the world reads them." The revelation struck harder than any insult Alma could ever throw. The homeless woman everyone had underestimated was suddenly the most powerful person in the hall. She wasn't just a date to embarrass Alma. She was a name, a legacy, a force. Guests stared in awe, some applauding softly, while others shook their heads in disbelief. Alma could barely breathe, her chest rising and falling in panic. The night that was meant to crown her as the star of society had instead revealed her deepest humiliation. And Zuri, the woman she had tried to belittle, now stood taller than anyone in the room. By the end of the night, the grand wedding hall that had once glowed with glamour now carried a different energy. Alma sat in stunned silence, her carefully crafted image of perfection shattered. Guests whispered endlessly, replaying the moments that had left them speechless. Zuri's calm dismantling of Alma's arrogance, the revelation of her true identity, and the quiet power she exuded. The expensive flowers, the chandeliers, the designer gowns, all that luxury seemed meaningless compared to the strength and dignity Zuri had displayed. The wedding that was supposed to celebrate Alma's triumph had become the night her pride was exposed, and everyone present had witnessed it. Zuri, walking hand in hand with Kweku, was the picture of grace and quiet power. Her steps were calm, deliberate, and every eye followed her, not with judgment, but with admiration. She wasn't the homeless woman who had sat under a bridge days ago. She was reborn, radiant not because of the gowns or the makeup, but because she had reclaimed herself. Kweku walked beside her, proud but not boastful, sharing her triumph without overshadowing her. Together, they left the hall as a unit, leaving Alma behind in the echo of her own arrogance. By the time they reached the streets of Kumasi, their story had already begun to spread. Phones were out, videos and whispers circulating faster than anyone could control. Social media exploded, the ex who brought a homeless woman and left the wedding in glory, people wrote, sharing the video clips and the pictures of Zuri's entrance. The narrative of humiliation had flipped entirely. Alma's wedding was no longer remembered for its opulence but for the woman who rose from nothing and left the world in awe. In that night, Kweku and Zuri didn't just claim victory, they became legends in their own right, proof that true power comes from dignity, courage, and knowing your worth.